welcome back to the Masters of Modern. I am your host, Alex Kessler, here with my co-host, Ben, the boss, Bateman.
Ben Bateman, the boss. I'm here. It's dignified. He called me the boss, guys. Got it. It's on record.
It's all over the internet. You can Google it and find.
You know what my original? Do you know my original name? I had a different moniker for my first 3 matches.
No.
I was Ben Big Time Bateman.
That's
originally.
So much better and worse at the same. It's like it's worse, but it's better.
Yeah. I was Big Time, and I lost my first couple matches, is what I want to say. I think my first singles match I was Big Time, but teams I had been Big Time, and I lost. And so we changed it to the boss. I changed my entrance music. And then ironically, this guy named Ethan, he actually is a big time producer. Like he produced Kiss, he like produced Kiss Kiss Bang Bang and The Nice Guys and like Sherlock Holmes. He's a good friend of mine. He is a big time person. And he came in and they called him Ethan Big Time Irwin. And then he went and he won the title.
Okay.
And so now he is still.
So he stole your name. So really the boss is a secondary lesser than.
I mean, if you want to frame it that way, but Ethan now this season is actually playing a character called Mr. Irwin. He had been doing Ethan Big Time Irwin for a while, but he finally bought into the character stuff. So now he like puts his hair in a ponytail and shows up in a suit, and all the people who are like in his faction are always like, Mr. Irwin would like you to leave. It's always it's like, oh, it's really good.
So for those joining us for the first time, we are a Modern and Magic the Gathering focused podcast and YouTube show. We're talking today specifically about the Power 9. So if people are not familiar with it, it is a series of cards originally printed in alpha and then beta that are, and unlimited, I believe, that are considered the most iconic Magic cards of all time. Maybe that there's arguments against that for some of them and for maybe some of the cards we're going to talk about today. And today we're going to be talking about what is the modern version of the Power 9. What if you look at the modern format historically, what would if you were to build a Power 9 for that format, what would that be? And we'll also talk about what that was maybe before War of the Spark and 2019, 2018, and after War of the Spark and the Modern Horizons era and where we're at right now. So
did you put, but real quick, we're going to get into this, but did you put a question about this on TikTok? I'm curious.
I did not put it on TikTok. I did put it on Twitter and our Discord. And if you want to get early access to being able to participate in the conversation on Discord, we have a Discord link below, and it's for the Masters of Modern Discord. We often get episode suggestions or what we're going to be talking about there. We also have a Patreon, which is also important. You get a full almost week early of the audio content, a day early of video content, plus that audio content has a bonus around 15 minutes of content every week. That's not necessarily always about Magic. It's often about movies or food or comic books or anime or whatever we're kind of watching or hanging out with, video games. And I highly recommend checking the Patreon out. Right now, I believe that the $2 tier has been sold out. So now there's $5 tier, but the $5 tier also comes with the 24-hour early release of the video episode. So a bunch of cool content there. Make sure to check out Patreon. Thank you to all of our patrons. Pinkies up. Thank you so much for all of your support. You're the reason this podcast can keep happening. Almost 7 years into it. Let's talk Power 9. So I do want to preface this, and we've been doing this a while. So we're going to be doing the Ultra Pro sponsored trivia question that's going to lead us into this conversation. The way this is going to work is we really could use your likes and subscribes. If you're new to this channel, please hit that subscribe button. If you're a loyal listener, we're going to want that like, but we want to earn it. So we're going to bet it. We're making a bet. If you can get this trivia question correct, you don't have to hit the like button. We'll appreciate it, but it's not required. But you have to comment below with the answer before Ben can answer it. And if you take too long or you get it wrong, then you have to hit that like button. And it is a Power 9 themed one. This is brought to our sponsor, Ultra Pro. You can see this cool Ultra Pro Ashiok binder here, and it is related to that. But we'll get that to a second. Ben.
Yes.
Why is the Power 9 cards?
Why is the Power 9 cards?
Of all, like in Magic, 8 is often because it's like a top 8. That's a normal thing. Yeah. 10 is a normal thing to count things on. In Magic, there are 5 colors. Why is it? It could be a top 5, a Power 5. Why is it a power of all numbers in Magic? Which, like, basically, I can't think of anywhere else that number is relevant but here. Why is the Power 9 the Power 9?
It's because classically binders have 9 cards per sheet, 3 across, 3 down. And so you wanted to be able to display your 9 cards in the 9 slot.
So I'm showing off some cards. These are some tokens from Inkling Custom in our this Ultra Bro binder, and there's 9 cards there. That is correct. It was just the like when you had your binder, the front page was going to be your 9 best cards, and if you can get the 9 best, you would show them off, and that was the Power 9. And the original Power 9 are the 5 Moxen, Black Lotus, Time Twister, Ancestral Recall, and Time Walk. 3 blue cards, 5 Moxen, so an artifact that produces a color of each color of the mana, and Black Lotus. That is the Power 9. Now, there's been arguments for like a Power 10, sometimes Time.
Soul Ring and Time Vault.
Time Vault's brought up there. Soul Ring, which is often not included because it wasn't a rare. But one of the reasons these cards were on this list is they were the 9 most expensive cards from that era. And
what's interesting about this too is that if you go back to the original Magic, like the people who played back then, because I did not play until 95. So by the time I played, Magic was expensive already, and these cards were already very expensive. But my brother played. He's who got me into Magic, and he played and he bought Unlimited. He bought his first box was Unlimited. So he knew even by the time Unlimited came out, which was only less than 2 years since after the launch of Magic, I think it was like a year later. These were already very expensive. They weren't expensive prohibitively like they are now. Like in that time, he had one of each Mox. He didn't have a Lotus, but he had a Lotus. Then he traded a Lotus away. Like, it was like $100 card, a $50 card kind of a thing. Like Lotus was $100 and like something else was like $2. It was expensive, but it wasn't like $1 million or like $10,000.
Like when we did Top Decking, we borrowed a Black Lotus from MTG
card?
Deals. It was MTG Deals because it was like a big plot point that he was going to buy this Black Lotus, and
right.
There was a whole thing about it, and it was a signed Richard Garfield Black Lotus, and it was pretty beat up. Like, mind you, it was like definitely almost damaged, if not heavily played, if not almost damaged, and $500.
Yeah, I mean, things have changed a lot. Things have changed a lot. I mean, scarcity and popularity, right? The more popular the game gets, the more important the legacy and lineage of the game gets. And then specifically, and this is something that's interesting, talking to a lot of our friends who are dealers and who sell singles, they will all tell you the same thing, which is that primarily the people who are buying Lotuses almost always are not actually buying the Lotus to have any type of gameplay experience with it. They're buying it 100% as a collector, and it's because they grew up wanting a Black Lotus. Now they have money, and now they can buy that thing that when they were a kid was the thing.
And for reference for people who don't know this, and this is I also understand that a lot of our audience knows already. Black Lotus, I believe, currently holds the record for most expensive piece of cardboard sold at $511,000. A Charizard Shadowless graded 10 or grade whatever high grade graded version of that was sold for, I want to say, $360,000, and please, comment if I got that wrong. But Black Lotus currently, it was a signed by Christopher Rush. It was a graded Black Lotus mint 10, right? Like that's like a thing that basically barely exists, and then the case itself was then signed by Christopher Rush, who has passed. So that's the most expensive version of cardboard ever sold.
It is estimated that there is approximately 5,000 Black Lotuses in existence in a sellable condition in any edition, Alpha, Beta, or Unlimited. So it's the Holy Grail. That's the OG card. Now, the second tier after you get past Black Lotus are the Moxes, the Moxen. There's one of each color. It's interesting too when you talk about these cards and their sort of power level relative to today's. All cards in this, they're all very powerful. Some people have said that they think. Well, actually, hilariously enough, I think over the years, Time Twister has proven to be more powerful in some ways than the other two blue cards.
I think Time Twister is still the least powerful card on this set, and the one card that there are a few different versions of what it does that there are better versions of.
Still pretty good though.
Yeah, very good. Well, did
you eventually, after years of wanting one, you actually bought one, right?
Like no. I don't. I've never owned Power. I've never owned any. I thought about bringing, when we went to Magic the Gathering Las Vegas, I was gonna think about bringing cards that I'd picked up. I have a bunch of Secret Lair cards I'm never going to play, and try trade into one. But I didn't do that.
I thought Twister was expensive, but still like in the range of gettable. Like a beat up one you could get for like less than 1,000 worth of cards or something. Is that not true anymore?
That was, and the last part of this episode I want to talk about is going to be about the Power Knight itself and its relationship to like Commander and other formats that he plays in. But really briefly, Time Twister is a fascinating one because it is the worst of the Power 9. Like of the Power 9 effects, it is the worst, but it is the only one that is currently legal in Commander. And so it's gained its own version of like notoriety in a way that the other ones haven't been able to in modern eras because CDH and wheel focused decks want to have a Time Twister. You can play with that in the format. So it has significantly picked up in playability where the other sets 8 are really only played in like Vintage. See a lot of play on Moto, right? Like Vintage, the one place that format's kept alive is on Magic the Gathering Online, and then Cube, right? Like people have powered cubes that have power in them. Yeah. So, but I do want to, before we jump into that conversation, I do want to bring it back to Modern because this is a Modern podcast. So that's what we're, that's the iconicness. This is the iconic 9 cards of early day Magic that have just held on to their mythos in the same way that Superman Volume 1 has, or Venture Comics Volume 1 has held on to its mythos. Action Comics number 1, and I wanted to bring that to Modern. Modern is now been around long enough that I think there is an argument for a lot of different cards of being that Power 9. And what does that look like? Now, I think we decided at the beginning of this conversation that banned cards count, partially because if you look at every other format of Magic, the Power 9 are banned in them as well and have been banned pretty much since early days of Magic. So I think that's a fair ask. I do think... So I was thinking about this since we talked at the beginning, and I want to hear your thoughts. I don't think we should include cards that have been banned forever.
Oh, interesting. Like, so Chrome Mox, you don't want Chrome Mox.
Yeah, I think cards that have never been legal in Modern, it's like hard to really justify that they have any relevance.
It's like not a Modern card.
Yeah, it's different than Hogak, right? Like Hogak was legal in Modern briefly, but broke the format in half. It's versus Chrome Mox, which I have no idea if Chrome Mox would be good in Modern. Chrome Mox could be bad. I don't think it would be bad, but there are cards on the ban list that have been on there since the beginning that like there's arguments like GT, people argue all the time, is not as good as people think it is. I'm not arguing that. I think GT is as powerful as people say it is, but GT, we have no frame of reference with the power level of GT as a Modern versus Ayavugan, Treasure Cruise, Dig Through Time, Gargari Grave Troll, etc., which I think we can have a little bit more of a holistic conversation around. So yeah, so that's what I wanted today's episode to be about.
Yeah, I think the conversation surrounding like what are we going to use to determine this? Like is it holistically powerful? Is it like ubiquitous? Like if you look at the original Power 9, they're rares, they're the most expensive cards, but they're also cards that effectively don't require a lot to be played, right? Like 6 of them are colorless and can be played in any deck, and every deck gets better by playing those 6 cards. The other 3 are all blue, and none of them cost more than a single blue, which ultimately means like they all can be played in a deck that wants to just play blue. Like all you have to do is have access to a single blue source, and you can play these cards. So it's like when I think about some of the options that we could be talking about, that like Kiki Jiki is really powerful. But to play Kiki Jiki, you have to have a really specific deck. It requires triple red. It's a combo card, right? I'm not saying that card would be on the list, but I think you understand my point. Like, yeah. I'm curious what the parameters here are going to be. So is it just the 9 most pound for pound powerful cards ever?
I think because the original Power 9 aren't all ubiquitous, right? There's some ubiquity, right? The Moxin and etc. But like Time Twister isn't, right? Time Walk, I would argue, is also not the most ubiquitous person, but I think I agree with you that it needs to have some variety to it and some longevity to it. I'm interested on the rare conversation, right? Because that is part of it. I mean, like there's a version of the Power 9, which is just what are the 9 most expensive cards in Modern, which actually I would be interested to look that up.
I almost am like, are fetch lands a slot? Like, are they a Power 9 slot? The type of card.
No. And I would, so lands dual lands weren't included, right? Like the fetch lands are the dual lands of this to then. So none of the lands count. There's one land I do want to talk about that I think could be included and maybe deserves it. And that is, and let's maybe start there. For extending all mana fixing lands, I think Ayavugan should be considered in this conversation.
Because of its immense level of power. Roka Pro Tour, it changed the game. but it's also not ubiquitous outside of that moment, outside of those decks, right? It wasn't good before that. It was only good during that time. It was only good because of the new printing of these Eldrazi cards.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think I would include Eye of Ugin. It doesn't to me feel like a card that is representative of like what we're talking about. I'm trying to think if there's any land like that is just like hasn't been long enough for me to say Urza's Saga, but I would be more inclined to go with a card like that than a card like Eye of Ugin, because it's like every single deck is pretty much made better by playing Urza's Saga, like pretty much ever. Like this, right? Like that's more in my mind where I'm going with. It's like what this is what I'd like to start with. Tell me if this is okay with you, because
Mm-hmm.
I think this is a great place. I think we can both agree that Deathrite Shaman is a modern Power 9 card. Yes?
Yeah, I think Deathrite Shaman is the first on the list.
So the reason I go Deathrite Shaman and I say that card applies, but like Eye of Ugin doesn't, decks literally that were not Deathrite Shaman decks that weren't even necessarily playing Deathrite Shaman colors as their primary colors, were like, we just have to figure out a way to play this card because it's better than all the other cards, and it's black/green. It can be played in basically any deck. Like, it's easy for every deck to play this card, and every deck is made better by supporting it. So like, all decks now need to play this card because it's legal. And that to me is indicative of like a Power 9 card. The power level, obviously, we've talked about Deathrite Shaman is the most powerful creature ever printed. It's the most powerful planeswalker ever printed. I mean, it's a joke, but it is the most powerful creature ever printed. I don't think there's a more powerful creature than Deathrite Shaman in Magic's history.
There's the Ragavan debate, but yeah, I agree. I think we've had this conversation a few times, and I think we've come to Deathrite Shaman every time.
Yeah, because, you know, obviously you get past a 1-drop, like there are certainly cards that are very powerful for their rate, but like turn 1 is so important in Magic, and it's the versatility and power and the acceleration. It's just, the card's very good. So for me, Deathrite Shaman would be an easy first spot on my modern Power 9. You concur?
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so I do have so we got our first one, Deathrite Shaman, put it on the board. The next thing I want to talk is rarity, because that's one thing that was pretty specific about the original set, was that Sol Ring was not included on the original Power 9, even though arguably Sol Ring is better than Black Lotus. Like, I have made that argument on the internet many times before, and is definitely more powerful than Time Walk and Time Twister. So is Sol Ring, if Sol Ring is not included, can we include anything that's not commons and uncommons?
I think for the purpose of this conversation, I don't think we have to stick to rarity. I think modern is from a time, and this is funny coming from me after all of our conversations about rarity, but modern is of a time where the cards that are being printed that are the best are not necessarily always going to be mythic rare. Like, they're not, it doesn't, you don't need that to be the case. I do have my opinions about the splashiness of cards and where they're printed, in terms of like an uncommon being like a splashy card is less common. So I still will have my like rare versus mythic rare surprises, but I recognize that's kind of my opinion on that's just wrong. So I don't think for this conversation we have to worry about that. I would say that, like, for instance, a card that you and I have talked about that is not a rare, that I think feels like a modern Power 9 card, I think is Lightning Bolt. I feel like that's a Power 9 card. I feel like it's
Deathrite Shaman snuck in there early, but I would put Lightning Bolt as like my first pick if someone were going to put my feet to the fire. Yeah, I agree. Lightning Bolt's on this list.
It's the most representative Magic card of modern, right? Our freaking logo of our podcast
Correct.
is a Lightning Bolt. And what's crazy about Lightning Bolt, and I think the elegance of the design, we've talked about this before, but like the idea that this card was designed in alpha at rate and is still competitive and playable, like it's still consistently great, is such a wild achievement for them to have come up with early on.
Mm-hmm.
All the different bells, just the small things, the fact that it's an instant, right? The fact that it's 3, not 2, the fact that it's to anything, like there's just so many, the fact that it doesn't have any stupid extra text that like Chain Lightning, for instance, is a good example of like the janky version where it's a sorcery and it has this weird other text that makes it not feel clean or elegant at all. Lightning Bolt's the exact opposite. It's like so simple, so easy to understand, and it set the standard forever of what you were going to be able to do with a burn spell. Like everything is essentially designed around Lightning Bolt, and that's stayed consistent since 1993 and has also defined the modern format for the last 11 years.
No, I agree. I think it's I could sit on a very wide audience balcony and shout that Lightning Bolt is actually the most iconic Magic card of all time.
Yeah.
More than any other card, more than Black Lotus, more than any other card printed. Black Lotus being as expensive as it is the one argument against it, right? But that's part of the, part of the other half. Way more people have played Lightning Bolt than Black Lotus by multitudes of infinity.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a lot there, right? All right. So the next card, and we're gonna go like back and forth. So I think this is a card. Okay, so this is maybe my hot take. I don't think this is that hot of a take. I think there's a version. So the Power 9 originally, and this kicks Deathrite Shaman off the list. Don't keep it up there and have Lightning Bolt underneath it. But this kicks Deathrite Shaman off the list in this argument. So the original Power 9, 3 blue cards, 6 artifacts. Is there an argument that it should be all one color? And should it just be Lightning Bolt, Faithless Looting, Ragavan? And then 6 artifacts that we come up with. I don't think that works because there's not enough powerful artifacts in the format, but are all 3 of them on this list?
I think Ragavan, Looting, and Bolt they're interesting choices. I thought about Looting specifically when we were I was looking at the ban list here, and it came across my desk, so to speak. I do think Ragavan, my only thing with Ragavan is, as good as that card is, and it's incredibly good, it's also really new. And it makes me wonder, like, I don't know. I mean, I do think it's a Power 9 card. It's just like Deathrite Shaman, I feel so much more comfortable assigning that to, and Bolt, and even Looting, because it's like we saw so many years of so many decks built around them. Whereas, like, I wouldn't think to put, was Oko ever legal in Modern? It was, right?
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't think to put Oko on a Power 9, even though, like,
so is our argument like, the cards that don't deserve to be on the Power 9 are flash in the pan bans. So the Delve cards. So that cuts all the Delve cards out. That cuts Ayavugan. That cuts Hogak. That cuts. Your argument is theoretically Ragavan, maybe. That cuts. It cuts a lot of like the random stuff from before the Spark onward, right? Get the Once Upon a Time, Uro, Oko specifically. Like, these are cards that were like
Mystic Monastery. I think I wouldn't necessarily say there's a hard and fast rule here, because I think that for me the most important factor is the nature of the card having kind of like, this is generically good. So a great example of that would be like Bridge from Below is a great card. It's a hyper specific 1 deck or 2 deck archetype card that's triple black, that's like not good in like it's not like a good Magic card. It's like a functional piece of some strategies. Whereas like Treasure Cruise is a blue card that if you're playing blue, every Modern deck can work if it wants to. It can just change the way that it's built slightly to play Treasure Cruise. Every single deck in Modern, if it wanted to. If that card was legal, every deck would just figure out a way to play it. Like,
to me, it doesn't really feel like it represents Modern in any way.
Yeah, but I mean, I think you understand my point. I'm not saying
necessarily is there. But like, if it was legal, it would be ubiquitous. But like a lot of these other cards,
it's generically good in like any deck. Drawing cards for a good rate is always good.
Well, that was
like
the problem with Once Upon a Time should be in consideration.
I thought about it. I thought about Once Upon a Time. I came across, like, I looked at it and I was like, well, that card is like. But yeah, I mean, why don't we start with stuff that's iconic as well as powerful? Because I think so. I think Tarmogoyf is a Power 9 card. Tarmogoyf's been like a staple creature, minimum of $40, as high as $140 or $200 at one point for the Modern's entire lifespan. Mm-hmm. Through powerful printings, other creatures, other printings, Tarmogoyf has stayed consistent. Like, I'm happy with Deathrite Shaman. This is such a boomer list. It's so funny. I'm happy with Deathrite Shaman, Tarmogoyf, and Lightning Bolt as our first 3 cards. Those all make sense to me.
Oh, they're like, I think Looting is on the list. I thought we kind of said Looting was on the list.
Yeah, I'll go with Looting, and I'll go with Ragavan. I will go with Ragavan. I'm willing to put Ragavan on, but we can table it if we want. Like, it does feel like
things can get kicked off when we bring them up. So the next card I would bring up is Mox Opal. Speaking of, can there be a Power 9 without a Mox on it? Is that allowed?
I think Opal is like a slam dunk. Like, to me, that, like, if you were going to ask me, it's like representative in like a lot of different ways.
Define Modern through every era until it was gone.
What about Gitaxian Probe?
No. I don't think it's always been the best cantrip even. Like there are other cantrips that were banned. I think like for instance, I don't think Treasure Cruise should be on this list. Like I don't think it I think it is as flash in the panty as Hogak is and as Irugan is.
What about Grand Architect?
Absolutely not. But speaking of architects, this is a terrible segue. Emrakul.
Oh, I think so. Because I think there's a level of importance, right? Like there's a level of like the history of Modern and the importance to the history of Modern that some of these cards need to have.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that Emrakul hits that pretty hard.
I think it is one of the most iconic cards printed in the last 30 years.
Agreed. Yeah, agreed. And what's cool about it is that it was printed. Anytime a card is printed that long ago and stays relevant for that long, it kind of keeps its special spot for a long time. I'm always impressed by it. And Emrakul was printed in 2010, and it still is like the ultimate threat.
Okay. Thoughtseize.
It's the next one I was going to say. Yeah, I think so. I think Thoughtseize. It's interesting because like we used to have our like 1-drop in every color and then our 2-drop creatures. And like of all those categories, only a couple of them I feel like make it here. Thoughtseize and Lightning Bolt for sure as far as the 1-drops go. I don't think any of the other Path maybe.
Path and Noble Hierarch are like the two like so let's go so the 1-drop cycle, right, is Thoughtseize, Kozilek, Lightning Bolt, Path, Noble Hierarch, and Serum Vision.
Serum Vision definitely is not on the list.
Agreed. There's that was my point with Cadaxian Probe, right? There's like 5 blue cantrips that all kind of are interchangeable between Opt, the new one that surveils, the Serum Visions, even Ponder and Preordain were legal at one point. Treasure Cruise, Gitaxian Probe, Thought Scour.
I don't think Hierarch makes it either. I think Hierarch gets. I think Hierarch barely misses because I think Deathrite Shaman's on there and it already kind of takes that spot.
Mm-hmm.
I think Path is right on the line. It's been incredibly good, but it's not actually that way now as much as it used to be. It's still like one of the best cards, but there's also a lot of options now. Prismatic Ending gets played a lot. You see people play a lot of Solitudes now. Obviously, we've had Fatal Push these last few years. It's played a lot. There's a lot of really good removal now. Path doesn't feel quite as necessary as it once did, whereas Lightning Bolt and Thoughtseize are still just pound for pound without even really blinking the best of their version.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think Path makes it either, as much as I like. Okay, Snapcaster Mage.
I would have said yes, classically, I think.
But now we're in the 2-drops, right? Those are the 5 iconic 1-drops, the 5 iconic 2-drops. This is a and there's more on here that I think I think Dark Confidant isn't on there. It's close. Sorry, said Tarmogoyf is. I don't think Young Pyromancer is.
Yep. Stoneforge maybe, but it's only been legal for a little while. I mean, it's really good, but it like came off the ban list. Stoneforge came off the ban list, and like it is really good, but it's not like ubiquitous in the way that I would imagine it. I always imagine it would be, where it would warp the format around it. It's just good in the decks. It's good in like any Magic card, but I don't feel like it's. I don't know. I don't think Stoneforge makes it. I think
it could in the long run, but I agree. If it had been on the legal, was banned, then came off, it would be there for me. But the fact that it just was unbanned does feel less like it belongs on this list versus a Legacy Power 9. And then I think Snapcaster for me though does. I don't like Snapcaster Mage has defined Modern in a way that very few cards have. Like I don't know if I can think of a more defining card for blue, even now with it seeing less play than it used to, which does make this a semi-boomer take on the card.
Our Tarmogoyf Snapcaster picks here is such boomer.
Well, no. I will defend Tarmogoyf. Tarmogoyf was seeing for a play in Zoomer Jund, which was a top 10, top tier deck, 5% of the metagame. Tarmogoyf belongs on this list. Now, what happens post Lurrus? People need to figure their stuff out. But Snapcaster Mage.
Back in my day, no.
Back in my day, 3 weeks ago when Lurrus was, we haven't even been able to do an episode on the Lurrus ban that goes over what the metagame looks like because it's not settled yet, and we would just be like behind by a weekend.
I'll give you Snap. I think it's. I mean, it's. I don't even have to give it to you. I love that card. I think it's fair. I think Snapcaster makes it. those are the two iconic cycles in Modern, the ones and the twos. They're
Mhm.
like really the standouts that, and we've got concluded a lot of those cards. Now, as far as the stuff outside of those cycles that is like and has that have been the like standouts, we talked about them. Opal for sure, Deathrite for sure, Ragavon for sure.
I think Ragavon's a maybe still for me, but
Emrakul. I mean, aside from those cards, I'm trying to think what else is like.
I have two big ones:
Okay,
Blood Moon and Primeval Titan that are missing.
Prime Time, I'm a little more. So Blood Moon and Prime Time are both interesting. Blood Moon is interesting, but it's really and has always been the most played and prominent sideboard card in Modern, but it still is a sideboard card.
Well,
Like
there are Pro Tour winning almost every single Modern Pro Tour top 8ing outside of the broken versions of the format Blood Moon focus decks in Blue Moon, Endor Sun and Moon, which then became just Red White Prison.
Yeah, I mean, debatable. I don't know if I put Blood Moon on the list. I think Blood Moon would be like in the Power 18.
Okay.
But I don't think Blood Moon quite makes. And I think Primeval Titan, to be honest with you, is probably like card number 10 on this list. That's what my gut tells me. Because Primeval Titan, the thing about it, look, Primeval Titan could. If Primeval Titan is on the list, the top 9, I wouldn't be shocked. Because there's a world in which you could convince me that Primeval Titan, for instance, is more important on this list than, say, even Tarmogoyf. There's a world in which you could convince me Primeval Titan should be on this list over Snapcaster Mage. If we're being honest, if we're talking about important creatures to Modern's history that are like slightly less powerful than they used to be, Primeval Titan is not. It's still played. It's still a standard card. Archetypes still are like shaped around it. It's existed for 10 years and it's stayed as the only card that does what it does. Like, there's a world in which Primeval Titan is more significant to this list than Snapcaster Mage. But we have more than 9. So some of these cards are going to get pushed to the second page.
Let's see what's on the list. We got Deathrite Shaman. We got Lightning Bolt. We got Looting. We got Tarmogoyf. We got Ragavon. We got Mox Opal. We got Emrakul. We got Thoughtseize. We got Snapcaster Mage. We got Primeval Titan. And we got Liliana the Veil.
Oh, you added Lily. You just threw it in.
Sorry. Liliana the Veil was the next card on my list.
You just nestled it in there.
I nestled that in there, but we don't have to add Lily. So before we get to Lily, well, okay, but before I think I'm a big fan of my deck building method, which is kind of what we're doing here, is to make a big pile of cards and then just start shaving cards off of it, right? Like make cuts after you figure out your pile. Does Liliana the Veil deserve to be in the pile to begin with?
Yes, but it's the same conversation we just had a second ago about page 2. I can tell you without even putting it in the top 9, it's like in the Blood Moon type. It's like it's in that conversation where you're talking about the 14th card, the 12th card. I just know because of the ones to me that feel like they fit, and I can already count in my head how close we are to 9, that when you're adding cards, like that's not better than or more iconic than most of the stuff that we're talking about here. So I would say Lily is probably a page 2. I mean,
okay. Some other ones, Court of Calling.
Great card, but no.
Birthing Pod.
It's 2 deck specific, I think. It's a great card, obviously. And it's the same conversation for Splinter Twin, right? Like both are super iconic and both like have a huge place in the format. And both of them, if this list was the top 25 most important cards in Modern's history, they're all the cards we just mentioned. We just pretty much made the top 25. Like we just did that. But as far as the Power 9 conversation goes, which I think is a little more specific, there's a combination of power, sort of pound for pound, ubiquitous power, and then the iconic and importance nature of the card. All those things have to kind of line up, and there's only 9. So I think some of those cards, like Birthing Pod, incredibly good, but very specific. Whereas Lightning Bolt is not. Nor is Thoughtseize, nor is Mox Opal. There's 25 decks that built around Mox Opal over the years.
Anamorphose.
Ooh. It's not going to make the top 9, but it's closer to the type of card I'm talking about. That card has been in 75 decks. That card has been in like
it's almost like the opposite problem where it's like I don't know. It's like not iconic in a way that's weird. Like it's like the workhorse of the format. Like it almost is weird. The soul ring where it's like this needs too much play. It's not
weird that Metamorphose is less iconic than it is or less iconic than it should be, because that card is like, when you want to talk about like cards that enable, in fact, the fact that card hasn't been banned at this point is kind of wild. When you want to talk about cards that enable certain strategies or even types of decks.
Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine what would have happened to Modern's history if Manamorphose had been banned 5 years ago, 10 years ago? Like it's been like an essential and irreplaceable card in like 25 different strategies.
Mm-hmm.
Like Storm couldn't exist without Manamorphose. I don't think. I'm pretty sure.
Oh, I found the Tarmogoyf deck that's still relevant. The number one most represented version of Murktide region decks right now are a Tarmogoyf deck.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Now
Pretty
Rug
cool.
with the lack of Lurrus in the format.
But isn't like Murktide with Goyf kind of bad? Because
You
you
can
drain
destroy
your
your graveyard well enough that it doesn't really matter as much, and your opponent gets stuff into their graveyard.
Okay.
I'm just using the MTG Goldfish deck listing, and it's the number one on the list. Additional cards. So Lurrus is obviously not. I think that's another flash in the pan conversation. It's a ban list that wasn't iconic. Golgari Grave Troll.
Dredge has been incredibly important. And there's been multiple Dredge decks over the years doing different things. This card always makes those decks better. But I do think of it as a more specific card. So like, whereas like Emrakul has shown up as a 2 of in like a bunch of famous decks, it's still the go-to option for all of the decks that want to cheat a big thing into play. Like, I mean, there's a couple other options, obviously like Gristlebrand, but like if you can do Emrakul, like if you can put it in from your hand, or you could like, it's the card, right? Or Primeval Titan. You cannot build strategies that want Primeval Titan without that card. And there's a lot of different versions of those decks, whether it's Scape Shift or it's Titan decks, or like there's 3 or 4 different versions of those Titan decks. There's, there's like, that card has just been in a lot of different top 8s represented in different ways. I feel like Grave Troll is a little too specific. I like a little too
Agreed.
it's like it's the same conversation I'd have about Hogak, or like any of those fast ban cards. They're like linchpins that make a certain strategy very good, but outside of that strategy, they don't do very much.
All right. Force of Negation.
Ooh, this one, if it was still gaining steam, I would say so.
It is the 9th most commonly played spell in the format.
Yeah, I mean, it is still very popular. I just feel like there was this point when that card got printed. This is like in my mind, the cycle. Card got printed. We all were like, wow, we have a Force of Will now. Then there was this period of like, oh, it's not quite as good as people thought because it's, he doesn't have the optionality. And then it was like, well, actually, it's still very good and everyone's playing it. And then it was like, oh, yeah, everybody just plays this card. But it's not like everybody just plays this card because it's going to make you win like Force of Will in Legacy does. It's like everybody plays this card because it's the best version of the effect. And I think it's really good, but I don't think that the decks that play that card get like infinitely worse without it. I think they just get a little worse. So I don't.
Is there a world where if Force of Will is printed in Alpha, it would be on the Power 9 list versus Time Twister?
I don't even think it's like a question. I think, yeah, if that was printed in the initial set, like by all accounts, that card should have been. I mean, I'm glad it wasn't because I think that the play design is more complex than I want out of my power cards. My like original set, it's like a second level Magic card. There's something cool about it coming in the late first era of Magic. Like it's them starting to explore design space. But I do think that if it had been printed in the first set, it would be on there ahead of Time Twister.
Okay. Cavern of Souls.
It's a great suggestion. I like it a lot. I like it because it fits into a lot of different strategies. It's one Pro Tours, one GPs, I should say.
It has to have been in Pro Tour winning decks, right?
I don't know that there's ever been a tribal Pro Tour winning deck. Has there?
Well, but it could have been like, yeah, sure. But continue.
Maybe it's standard.
No, I meant more like it's in the deck in like a deck that's just like wants to not get countered with the one card they're playing with it. But yeah, continue.
Yeah, I was thinking elves, merfolk, humans, something like that. Interesting. I think we're grasping at straws outside the top 9 here. I kind of think we have the top 9. This was what my gut told me.
Well, I have a few remainers. Chalice of the Void.
I thought about this one. It being an artifact is the most like convincing for me. And the reason is because this card, I mean, okay, so if we want to talk about like a card that has had success in main decks. This was in the main decks of all of those Ayabugan decks. They were all playing this card, right, as a 4 of in the main deck. So, like, in the same way that season was defined by Ugin, this is also defined by this card. This has been in sideboards for years. There's a world in which I think Chalice of the Void is actually on this list. It's the same world that I think Simian Spirit Guide's on this list. Like, it's the same, like, moment where I'm like, you could convince me based on Modern's history that either one of those makes the 9. And I would fight. I mean, Spirit Guide. In fact, maybe I'm just going to argue for Spirit Guide. Spirit Guide maybe deserves top 9. No.
I think Lightning Bolt sneaks on, and I think Lightning Bolt and Looting sneak on as not rares. But I think like Simian Spirit Guide to me does not fit the bill in the way some of these other cards do. I think we kind of agreed that right now for this first version of the list, we're not including any of the Modern Horizons 2 cards. All right, so let's. Last, Jace the Mind Sculptor.
The funky one, right? And the reason is because it was banned initially when the format started. It was unbanned, and similar to Deathrite Shaman, turned out to be a really good Magic card, but didn't turn out to be format defining. It just turned out to be really good, like good in the decks it's good in. Played as a 2 of in control decks, splits with Teferis. Doesn't seem to be more important to the decks that it's in than I would say either of the Teferis for the most part. Yeah, I don't think so. I think if I think if maybe the format had started with it in the format from the beginning, it would be. And there's a part of me that wonders what would have happened if we had started with Jace. Like, is there a part of you that thinks about some of these cards that started out on the ban list that became unbanned? And if we had just started out with those cards in the format, what Modern would have looked like, or like would it have been good, would it have survived? Like, what if Jason Stoneforge were just in Modern in 2011?
I think they would have dominated. I mean, we've seen Jace and Stoneforge Mystic be very good, and I think the things that make them not as good now didn't exist.
Right. Magic's just way more powerful than it used to be.
Yeah. I think obviously the spectrum, right, is Jason Stoneforge Mystic legal and standard together, and Jason Stoneforge Mystic legal now. Jason Stoneforge Mystic legal and standard together broke the format in half in such a thorough way that it was one of the first in the era when they were banning stuff in a much more conservative way, broke the format in a way that hadn't been broken in a long time. Jason Stoneforge Mystic now actual staples of the format. Stoneforge Mystic has at least 2, if not 3, key format defining decks built around it. Jace the Mind Sculptor is seeing play as the 17th most played spell in Modern currently. I believe Stoneforge Mystic might be the most, or is it on the creature list? It is the top 20 most played creature in the format. So, like, I don't think you could argue for either of them. And the power level of Modern is drastically larger now than it was 6 years ago, 8 years ago, whatever. So, I don't think it's a comparable era. To be honest,
that's fair.
All right, so our list, because I have a different version of this list that I'll read through that's like less argument based in a second as the next thing, and then we can get to the last piece. But right now we have Deathrite Shaman, Lightning Bolt, Faithless Looting, Tarmogoyf, Ragavan, Mox Opal, Emrakul, Thoughtseize, Snapcaster Mage, Primeval Titan, and Force of Negation. That is 11 cards. We have to cut 2.
My gut tells me Force of Negation is getting cut. That's an easy cut for me. What does your gut tell you out of that 10 gets cut? Emrakul?
Thoughtseize?
Interesting. I don't think so.
Think position of Kozilek being like often the better option anyways. Kind of the same reason Noble Hierarch isn't on this list.
It's fair. I would probably cut. No, Emrakul's iconic. I might cut Primetime.
No.
I
believe I've argued that Primeval Titan is responsible for more cards on the ban list than any other card currently there. Maybe Gutshot. It's like Gutshot and Primeval Titan are like responsible for more cards being banned than any other card in Modern.
I'll give you Thoughtseize. I will.
Okay. All right. So. Our list are, this is the Ben and Alex, maybe a little bit boomer, top 9, power 9 of Modern. Deathrite Shaman, Lightning Bolt, Looting, Tarmogoyf, Ragavan, Mox Opal, Emrakul, Snapcaster Mage, and Primeval Titan. All right.
That seems pretty accurate to me.
Okay. Now, do you want to hear the other version of a power 9?
Yes.
And I want you on your hands to count the cards I list.
Okay.
So this is the argument for a different version of the Power 9. This Power 9 is top 9 staples listed by cost.
Most expensive. Okay.
Most expensive cards. And we didn't talk about this one, but we kind of avoided the Modern Horizons cards. Ren 6 is number 1 on this list.
How much is Ren 6?
Ren 6 is currently $100.
Oh, that's it.
Next, and we can. I'm going to list them literally every card in order. Most expensive. This is from Scryfall. Ren 6, Oboro, Palace in the Clouds doesn't feel like it belongs on. That doesn't feel like a Power 9 card. Doubling Season has nothing to do with Modern. Not a Power 9 Modern card. Ragavon is number 2.
Interesting. Okay.
All right. Cavern of Souls is number 3. Force of Negation is number 4.
Okay.
Next, we have Blightsteel Colossus. That's not a Modern card. Painter Servant, not a Modern. Not nothing to do with Modern. Great Artemancy, nothing to do with Modern. Next is Kozilek, Butcher of Truth.
Interesting.
Which is wild to me.
Nothing to do with Modern, though.
I don't think that has to do with Modern. That is not one. So 1, 2. So at this point, we have Ren 6 1, Ragavan 2, Cavern of Souls 3, Force of Negation 4. Next on the list is Liliana of the Veil at 5.
How much is that card? Like $75?
It is somewhere between 60 and 100, depending on the listing. Next on the list, so that's 5, is Urza, Lord High Artificer.
Yeah.
At 6.
Yep.
Next is Chalice of the Void at 7.
Yep.
Next is Jace the Mind Sculptor at 8. Ironically, Thrumming Stone is on here.
Wow. Also nothing to do with Modern.
And number 9, and this is the last card before we get into some fetch lands, Seasoned Pyromancer at number 9.
Seasoned Pyromancer. The Seasoned
Pyromancer. That is the Power 9 of Modern if the only qualification is that you are a Modern staple and you are the most expensive cards in the format. And that is a obviously modular list. Like at Solitude at some point was higher. Solitude is the next card, and then Stoneforge Mystic are the next two cards.
Is pretty silly, if I'm being honest. I feel like our Power 9 is far more.
That was the original Power 9. The original Power 9 existed because they were the 9 most expensive cards from Alpha and Beta. That's all that list is.
I mean, in 2011, what were the 9 most expensive cards in Modern?
I have no way of looking that up. In 2011, I would imagine it's Tarmogoyf is number 1, Liliana of the Veil, Snapcaster Mage, Fetchlands.
Yeah, that seems pretty accurate. Karn, probably.
Yeah, Karn the Great Creator was up there for a while.
Karn Liberated. Great Creator wasn't printed yet.
Oh, sorry, yeah, Karn Liberated, which we didn't talk about either of those. Karn
Liberated's iconic, but it's not as iconic as Lily. Yeah, I think our Power 9 is better. I think it to me it feels more accurate. So I think I would lean into ours.
So that is the Power 9 of Modern conversation. Those are the two lists. I think you could pick which one you want to go with. Ben likes his. I don't hate the cost one. I think that one's really interesting. As like an actual.
You think Seasoned Pyromancer should be on a Power 9 list?
I think Seasoned Pyromancer will get knocked out by Stoneforge Mystic or Solitude within the next year.
Some of the other cards on there were sweet, like Cavern of Souls. Like there's some that definitely stand out that I think are cool, but.
Yeah, I think both Solitude and Stoneforge Mystic, which are the next two, and they're like neck and neck, will knock out Seasoned Pyromancer. But I think
the whole caveat of like these cards have nothing to do with Modern and they're expensive. Like this doesn't hold water because like we know that, but that also they're legal in Modern and they're expensive. So like if we're going off of the cost list, then like it's just whatever the most expensive 9 cards are.
Well, but a lot of the cards that we have, that's fair. All right, now last conversation for the night before the podcast ends, and that is the Power 9 currently, other than Time Twister, and we talked about this before, which is the only legal one in Commander. I was asked this today on the internet. What is your hot take? Has to be just insane. What is your most insane hot take? No soft takes here. And mine was unban all of the Power 9 in Commander.
The original Power 9?
The original, not our Power 9. The original Power 9.
Why?
Black Lotus, all 5 Moxen, Time Twister, Time Walk, all unbanned.
And allow everybody to play proxies?
Well, I think that happened. That happens already, right? The proxy conversation, obviously, from head sources, is not being mentioned, but it's not like the general consensus on the internet is that if you are anti-proxy in Commander, you are the more toxic person than the person who is pro-proxy.
The only issue with that is I just think like games of Commander already swing pretty hard when you deal with the powerful cards that are just I've played a lot of Dockside, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I have played that card a lot of times, and the card is really good, and it's good in the decks that it's good in, and it's also just good in all decks, even if it's not in a deck. Like the decks I build, it's especially good, but it's just good anyway. If I play Dockside in the right moment, it wins the game. Straight up wins the game on its own. I don't think that Commander needs more cards that make it swingy. So, like, if Black Lotus is legal and everyone's going to play Black Lotus proxies because nobody has them,
Well,
that just
no,
means
because a lot of people don't play proxies, right? So there's especially in the more casual of a crowd you're in, the less proxy friendly you are. Like it is a self-solving problem, right? Like
I guess
like
my point,
the one guy owns Black Lotus and wants to take it out of his $30,000 case or whatever. They get to use it, and it's like, but they're also not going to be using it to like combo win. They're going to use it to pump out a 5/5 or a 5-drop on turn 2.
I know, but I guess my point is like I would play a proxy Black Lotus in every single deck ever, and I would play all the Moxen because why wouldn't you? Because like the only reason you wouldn't is out of respect for your casual group. But if you're trying to play, if you're going to proxy it once ever in a single deck, then like I'm never going to buy those cards, which means that if they're available to me to be played as proxies, I just don't think it makes Commander better.
Well,
I guess
so that was one of the reasons they were banned. I mean, the Moxen, the cost is Commander, right? Like the color identity affects Moxen, so you only get access to the ones in your colors. They become auto includes unless you're whatever. Time Walk is probably the most toxic of the list. Like if I were to pick a card I don't want unbanned on these, like the one that's going to make me the least happy, it's Time Walk. Like Time Walk's going to cause the most problems. I think Ancestral Recall honestly could be unbanned, like not as a hot take, but as well, not as a steaming hot insane take, just as like a normal hot take. I think Ancestral Recall is totally fine legal in Commander. I don't think it is busted in any way.
Yeah, it's certainly interesting. The conversation here is really fascinating. You know, what's funny about this conversation is that one of the things that has made Highlander Gauntlet such a fun time for us over the years playing it is that there's 6 decks, right? So even if you have powerful cards, you know they're not going to show up in every single deck because you have to split them up. That's the only thing that I dislike about this idea is that Commander, if we're going to allow proxies, it makes me feel like I would always want to be playing blue, and I would always be playing a Mox, a Lotus, and those 3 cards. And I already play Twister in most. Like I don't have a Twister, and I play Twister in almost every blue deck.
Okay, so are you playing Jewel Lotus in every deck you own?
No, but that's because Jeweled Lotus is bad later in the game, unless I need an expensive Commander recast. But for me and the Commanders I play, they cost 2 or 1.
Is
if
it
I
in
draw
Prismari?
Lotus,
Because it's insane in Prismari. That is an insane card in that deck.
It might be. I think that card's cheesy, so I don't play it.
that sentiment applies to a lot of these cards in this format.
Yeah, but then when I'm playing against you and you have a Black Lotus and it's just a piece of scrap paper that says Black Lotus, I'm like, why am I not playing Black Lotus? I hear your point. If it did happen, we would play with it. I feel like it is unnecessary and doesn't make Commander more fun.
Well, but like, you've played Cube, right? Playing powerful cards is fun.
Yeah.
And I would say that a lot of the Power 9 do not create. I would say the Moxen are a problem. I think I can agree with that. It gives it gives more power to the more colors you're playing, which I think is a thing you want to avoid. I think that's really the biggest argument against them to me, is that like basically now I'm incentivized to play a 5-color deck because I get 5 Moxen. Every other commander is worse. It's like the Golos argument, right? Like every other commander is worse than me playing this 5-color deck because 5 Moxen and having access to them in my deck is better than any commander that exists.
Yes, exactly.
I think that Time Walk creates negative experiences. Time Twister is already legal. So then the question is Black Lotus, which I actually think is fine, but it would just be so expensive that would maybe be limiting, and Ancestral Recall, which like like, are you playing Treasure Cruise in any deck you own?
Yeah.
Prismari?
I think I play Cruise in like most of my blue decks. Most of my decks are pretty spell heavy, so Most of my commander decks, I'm like fine with it.
Is it an overpowered experience, or is it just like because that card is broken in every format, right? Like
it's a draw. I mean, it's a great draw. When I draw it, I'm always real happy about it.
Sure. No, it's a good card. Not arguing it's a good, and obviously Ancestral Recall is one of the best cards ever printed. But I think in Commander, the way it scales, probably fine. This is me just arguing that Ancestral Recall should be unbanned in Commander, I guess.
I mean, there's like Ancestral Recall as a really playing powerful cards is fun. I think your point about 5-color incentivization is a strong point that I think is probably a good reason to not unban the Moxen. Even if you have a Lotus in your deck and you draw it mid-game, it's not going to be that much of a swing. It only really is going to be a massive swing when it's in your opening hand. Like in the first 2 or 3 draws, that's where the game feels so stilted. But the point is,
like, think about the amount of people that have argued that Sol Ring is better than Black Lotus.
And think about how it feels. And think about how it feels in a game with 4 people where one guy draws his Sol Ring in his opener and the others don't. And like he doesn't do something broken. He actually plays pretty fair. He doesn't attack anybody. He just starts to build a presence. And he's so much further ahead just by that virtue of one thing. I don't know that we need more of that. Like, it's already fine that Sol Ring exists and Mana Crypt exists. Like I've had those hands where I draw both in my opener. I'm like, this is so dumb. I
think Black Lotus would be less toxic to Commander than Mana Crypt is.
I mean, I think it's
Sol Ring. Sol Ring is a debate. I think Sol Ring is better than Black Lotus for the game, not better in power level. I think I think Mana Vault is a more toxic card than Black Lotus is. I guess the like Black Lotus has the combo potential, right? It has I play this out of my graveyard using Underworld Breach infinite amount of times. I loop this somehow to make infinite mana, whatever. That's where Black Lotus is more broken than Mana Vault. But Mana Vault most of the time is and its drawback, though not insignificant, like that 3 life matters, is like way more mitigated in 40 card than 20 card. Yeah, I don't know. That's definitely my like maybe hot take, is that Black Lotus is less powerful than Mana Vault in Commander, and that Ancestral Recall should be unbanned.
Well, you heard it here. You heard it here first, folks. Tweet at Alex. Follow him on TikTok and argue with him at Kess Wiley on TikTok and on Twitter. I don't post about Magic on my TikTok, but I do respond sometimes to Alex's post on Twitter. And if you ever DM me or tweet at me, I like to answer because I play a lot more Commander than I used to. So yeah. I feel like that mostly wraps up our conversation surrounding Power 9.
So that is today's episode. Thank you once again to our Patreons. Thank you to Ultra Pro. Thank you to Alter Sleeves. You can go below. There are links to like our favorite cards from Alter Sleeves that if you buy, we get a kickback, or just use the code the MMcast on Alter Sleeves to help the podcast and show them that we're supporting them so that they can support us. Big shout out towards Battle Bosses. So it's the game we made. It's really cool. You should check it out. It is available now on the Kess shop. And we're just did a whole show at Gamma. There's a bunch of your local game stores that were really excited by it. If you have a local game store that you think would like Battle Bosses, please let them know that we're out there and that they can reach out to us. We have a link on our website for stores. We'd love to hear from them and to start kind of building that Battle Bosses community. So thank you to anyone who's played Battle Bosses, has checked it out, and let us know if you have a local game store that you think might be able to carry it. We're excited to get it out there.
Yeah, it's been really, really fun. And at Gamma, it was really, really a fun time to talk to local stores and get a feel for people as people have returned to in-person playing experiences and just seeing the general reaction to the game. It was very cool to get to talk to new people and store owners, specifically store owners who are giant game nerds like us, and seeing their reaction to the game. It was a really, really fun time.
All right, that's it for today's episode. Thank you so much. We'll talk to all of you next week.
Bye, everybody.
This has been a production of Time Traveler Media, sending podcasts into the future.